Can you see my slides here?
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. So first of all, thank you very much for joining us today at the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Actions COFUND 2026 session. My name is Raquel Melguizo, and I'm the national contact point for the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Actions in the UK. And today I have the pleasure to have with me Jozsef Mikita, who is the Research Program Manager at the European Research Executive Agency. We also have in here today Dr. Jesper Christensen, an Associate Professor at Coventry University, where he's the Postgraduate Research Lead for the Future Transport and City Research Centre. Overall, he's responsible for 50 postgraduate researchers, and he has successfully secured a Marie Curie COFUND Award in June 2025. So just a reminder, a bit of housekeeping, that all participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. The session is being recorded, so there is no need to frantically take notes, and a chat function is available and will be monitored. Please use the Q&A function to submit your question, and that voting is available. There will be a specific session right at the end to address all the questions that you have, and as it's a fairly small group, there is plenty of time to have your questions answered right at the end. So today's session, it will be a brief introduction to the services that we provide. We'll talk about the UK association to Horizon Europe and what does that mean for the MSCA Actions. I will do a very brief introduction to the different MSCA program or the MSCA Actions before I hand over to Jozsef Mikita, who will be covering the MSCA COFUND, followed by a presentation by Dr. Jesper Christensen that it will talk about his experience of applying and successfully securing an MSCA COFUND award. And then right at the end, there will be opportunity for questions and answers. So the UKRI Horizon Europe team will support UK-based organisations that are involved in European research and innovation. Our mission is to maximise the UK participation in Horizon Europe, whether you come from academia, small, medium enterprises, industry, etc. We have a dedicated ACRO portal where you will find dedicated news articles, events like the one today, fact sheets to the different programs to support participation in Horizon Europe. And you can subscribe to our alerts where you will be receiving upcoming opportunities and call updates. We are the UK national contact point for the European Research Council, better known as ERC, the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Action Programs, the widening participation and the cost actions, as well as the new European Bauhaus. And we are part of the UKRI's international team. As you probably already know, the UK associated to Horizon Europe and Copernicus on the 1st of January 2024. So what does that mean is that UK entities can participate and coordinate projects and receive funding from Horizon Europe. There is an exception for the equity element of the EIC fund, which includes both the EIC step and the blended funded equity element of them. Our portal, as I said, includes information on the upcoming European funding opportunities too. So what does that mean for the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Action? So for the MSCA COFUND call, UK-based organisations can participate as beneficiary, and Jozsef Mikita will cover that in more detail as they are mono-beneficiary actions. They can coordinate projects, so we can coordinate projects. we can recruit doctoral candidates if you're applying for the doctoral type of COFUND, or postdoctoral fellows if you are applying for the postdoctoral type of COFUND. Can award PhDs and can host secondments. There is further information in the little cloud here where you will find information about the UK association to Horizon Europe, specifically the MSCA Actions. So now moving on to a brief introduction to the Maria Skłodowska-Curie Actions and where it sits in the Horizon Europe family. So Horizon Europe is the EU key funding program for research and innovation. It lasts for 7 years. So it started in 2021. It finishes in 2027. So we're coming towards the last 2 years of the program. It has a budget of 93.5 billion, and that doesn't include the contribution made by associated countries such as the UK, New Zealand, Canada. Of that budget, 7% goes to the MSCA Actions, so it's a substantial amount of funding. And since the launch in 1996, MSCA has become the EU reference program for doctoral education and postdoctoral training. So just to put this into context, in Horizon 2020, which is the previous framework program for research and innovation that started in 2014 and finished in 2020, the MSCA supported 65,000 researchers in Europe and beyond and funded over 1,000 excellent international doctoral networks. You can see on the slides that it sits in the pillar 1, which is the excellent science. So moving on, the MSCA Action is set out to support researchers' training and career development. It creates impact on researchers, institutions and systems and contribute to the EU priorities. So the MSCA focuses on the European Commission commitment to tackling climate and environmental related challenges, and all the MSCA projects are encouraged to address the principle of the MSCA Green Charter and implement measures to minimize the environmental footprint of their activities. And he does it through encouraging people to become researchers and innovators, equip the researchers with the necessary skills and international expertise to broaden their experience, support long-term employability and develop attractive career opportunities. It fosters innovation and develops entrepreneurial mindsets. And it promotes the EU global attractiveness for talent. So the way that is structured, so the MSCA contributes to the development of excellent doctoral programs and postdoctoral training programs, as we've seen before, and it does it to increasing the quality of the research training. It provides a fairer and more attractive working and employment conditions, improve the career guidance and the development of their researchers, and enhance the global reputation and visibility of their researchers, and we'll see the institutions too. By having a positive impact on individual researchers, it provides a positive structural effect on organization, and it does it through increasing the quality of the supervision, strengthening the research capacity, building new and sustainable partnerships in Europe and beyond, and the transfer of knowledge between the sectors and disciplines, and enhance the global reputation and visibility of the institutions that participate in. As you probably already know, there are several MSCA actions. So we have the MSCA Doctoral Network, which support doctoral programs developed by universities, research institutions, and research infrastructures, businesses, including SMEs and other socioeconomic actors from different countries in Europe and beyond. The total budget for the 2026 call is 593.03 million euros. The call is expected to open on the 28th of May 2026, with a deadline of the 24th of November 2026. Moving on to the postdoctoral fellowships is about enhance the creative and innovative potential of researchers holding a PhD. The 2026 call has a budget of 399.05 million euros. The call is expected to open on the 9th of April 2026, a bit earlier than usual. Usually it opens in May. This year it opens in April. Deadline is the 9th of September 2026. The staff exchanges is there is a call currently open, which close quite closely to the COFUND. So the call it promotes innovative, international, intersectoral and interdisciplinary collaborations in research and innovation. The call has a budget of 97.92 million euros, and the call is currently open with a deadline of the 16th of April 2026. And the focus of today's session, it will be the COFUND, which is a co-fund mechanism to new or existing national, regional or international doctoral programs and postdoctoral fellowship schemes. The call, as we said, is currently open. It has a budget of 105.46 million, and the deadline for the call is the 8th of April 2026. Then we have the MSCA and Citizen, which aims to bring research and researchers closer to the public at large to increase awareness of research and innovation activities and to boost public recognition of science and research education. There won't be a call in 2026, but there will be a call in 2027. And last but not least is the Choose Europe for Science, which is a co-fund mechanism for postdoctoral programs. It will replace the postdoctoral program for the co-fund in 2027. There was a pilot open up until last year, December last year. The new call is slightly different, as it has a maximum funding available per beneficiary of 5 million, as opposed to the 3.5 million that were included before. It follows the postdoctoral fellowship contribution model for the EU funding phase, including the country correction coefficients, and there is a bit of flexibility regarding the order of the two phases. There won't be a call in 2026, but there will be a call in 2027, and further information is available in the 26-27 MSCA work programme. Here's a list of resources before I hand over to Jozsef Mikita. Where you will find is the EU funding and tenders portal, which has all the information about the call and all other calls from the work programme, the guide for applicants, the application form, the evaluation criteria, etc. The work programme 26-27, you've got a direct link in here. The financial guide, which has loads of useful information regarding what costs are eligible or not. The MSCA guidelines and supervision. The guide for applicants, which is extremely useful when it comes to prepare your application, and our dedicated fact sheets, which has a pre and post awards information in there. And last but not least, I would like to mention the Radiance program, which provides a guide to applicants through frequently asked questions, handbooks for each of the schemes, MSCA schemes, and the new MSCA matchmaking platform that brings together academic organizations, companies, NGOs, supervisors, etc. And in there, you will find a list of the sessions that we have scheduled for this year so far, and further information will follow soon. So thank you very much. And now over to Jozsef Mikita.
Yes, thank you very much, Raquel, and thanks for the invitation today, and also thanks to all of you who have joined the meeting and for your interest in our programs. So am I able to move now the slides or not yet?
Could you gain control of the slides?
I'm trying to look for this if there is a way to do that, but
it's at the top, but mine is grayed out too. So I don't know if that's just say take control at the top, but mine is grayed out too.
I cannot do that.
That's okay. What I can do, I can stop sharing so you can present yours. It's easier. So I will stop.
Okay.
Let me see if I.
Okay. Maybe.
I will
Yeah,
stop
indeed.
sharing and then you can easily share yours.
Okay. Let me see if it works. Do you see something? And now I have to maybe swap this like this. Is it better now?
Perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. Okay. Thanks a lot. So
Thank you
yes,
very
once
much,
again,
Jozsef.
so my name is Jozsef Mikita, and I work in Brussels in the European Research Executive Agency. So we are an agency created by the Commission to implement different EU program parts, most notably the European Framework for Research and Innovation, and a big part of our mandate is focused on the Marie Curie actions. So all the big actions that Raquel just presented are implemented, and I mean we are doing the contracting and then the monitoring of the funded grants as well in our agency. So myself, I've been involved in Marie Curie actually not not very long time ago. I've been looking after the COFUND call since 2025 as a co-coordinator, and I will be doing that for the rest of this MFF, so certainly for the next 2 years. Okay, so I'm going to explain to you Marie Curie COFUND is one of the 4 main schemes. It's a cascading scheme, so basically it's mono-beneficiary, so we are contracting only one institution or organization, and this institution and organizations will commit to run the doctoral or postdoctoral fellowship schemes. And well, we are contributing a fixed amount per eligible recruitment month for the future fellows, and then it needs to be complemented by own resources coming from the beneficiary itself. So the main policy objective of this scheme is to basically bring the best practices of these selection and recruitment modalities from the European to the national and regional level, and then to endorse interesting and high level conditions, appointment conditions for researchers, and also to share these best practices all across the continent. So as Raquel already mentioned, we have 2 strands. We have doctoral and postdoctoral programs. For the time being, 26 will be the last call with these 2 strands, and afterwards 27 COFUND, let's say the traditional COFUND, will only launch a call for doctoral programs, and then Choose Europe will step in and will be dedicated to doctoral fellowships. So who can apply? I mean, again, the applicant and the signatory of the grant is one single legal entity established in EU member states or in an associated country, like in your case, the UK. And this single beneficiary / coordinator, I mean, sometimes the terminology varies. I mean, because it's only one signatory, you might see referred to as beneficiary or coordinator, but in COFUND it's exactly the same thing. So it can come from academic sector and non-academic sector as well. There are no limitation at all. And what are the typical constructions of such a grant? So if the applicant is a so-called research funding organization, then typically there are involvement of other type of entities as well, universities, let's say, and these are acting as implementing partners, and they are the ones recruiting. Or you can have a different setup whereby one university is the beneficiary as well, but also recruiting along with other universities acting as other implementing partners. And also we have examples of grants where we have one single entity performing the work. So recruitment and also providing training to the fellows, and then without the involvement of other participants. So besides the single entity, as I mentioned, we have on the one hand implementing partners that can be involved in COFUND grants. These partners can come from the EU member state, associated countries, or the low middle income countries. This you can see in the general annexes of the work program, Marie Curie 26-27 work program, to see the exhaustive list of these countries, and the associated partners can come from any country in the world. So there is absolutely no limitations. The implementing partners, they can recruit, so they can recruit fellows, and they can receive funds from the beneficiary. Although with us, we are only contractually linked to the beneficiary or coordinator. So they are not signing anything to implementing partners, and they don't claim cost either. But they can, since they can recruit, they can receive money from the coordinator/beneficiary. Associated partners, their main role is basically to provide training or host fellows in secondment during these programs. Okay, so some basic principles that is valid and that remains valid also for the last two calls. So we have a limit of maximum 10 million euro per beneficiary or coordinator per call. The duration of the program is 60 months, and the minimum fellowship should be 3 months. Now, we are really trying to point this out. I mean, all the applications should be aimed at 60 months, and I mean, it's not excluded that during the course of the implementation there could be some adjustments, notably extensions, but it's very rare, and it should be very well justified. But certainly, when the application at the application stage, I mean, everything should be planned for 60 months. Meaning that all the preparatory work and all the actual recruitment and the fellowships themselves should fit into this period. And another important point, that the recruitment, so there should be minimum 3 fellows recruited during the planned program. So the criteria, award criteria is following the standard Horizon Europe criteria: excellence, impact, implementation. Excellence being the most important, and then impact and implementation. So looking at the work program 26-27, there are some changes with respect to the previous edition. So there has been an introduction of the minimum threshold of 3 on all criteria. So that I think it will be quite important, and especially on their excellence, this could be a game changer for many applications. The duration of the secondments have also been extended from 1/3 to 1/2 of the fellowship duration, and also overall for the contribution that has been defined under the unit cost has also been adapted now, so it's slightly higher than in previous years. Now, when it comes to the COFUND action itself, maybe some of you have noticed that there is a new sub-criterion included into the under excellence. Notably, it talks about the research and innovation objectives of the program. So, in fact, it seems to be really a big novelty. However, a similar point was already included in the past under a different criteria. So basically, here, it's the idea behind this inclusion was to align also COFUND to the other Marie Curie actions and highlighting the fact that it's under the excellence pillar of the framework program, and it's really the science should be really properly explained and demonstrated. But for the COFUND's sake, it still remains a rather compliance-like check. So the experts, we will ask the expert to check whether these objectives and innovation and research objectives are presented in a sound manner. So it will not, COFUND will remain, let's say, a non-scientific evaluation, since all the other criteria under excellence already takes quite a lot of space and time for the applicants to describe and also for the experts to judge and evaluate. So this is important to note. We also suggested DGAC to remove the exception to the mobility rule, which was in place for ongoing programs. So basically now the mobility rule as it is has to be complied with. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with this rule. It's all across the Marie Curie. Basically, when the fellow is recruited from country A to B, this transnational mobility has to be demonstrated, and there should be clear proof that this is actually happening. And an important condition is that the fellow who moves from A to B in country B, this fellow cannot have resided, worked, or studied more than 1 year in the 3 years immediately prior to the co-funded call deadline. So this is something that we check. I mean, the experts are checking that this is, at that moment, of course, the program can commit because we don't know the fellows at this stage yet. But they have to be really spelled out in the application that the program will comply with this rule. And then when the program is being implemented and then they are reporting to us, we are checking one by one the recruited fellows, whether this mobility rule has been respected or not. And in case of non-compliance, we have the right to reject the cost linked to those fellow month or recruitment month for those fellows that are not compliant, basically. And yes, and now also the criterion about the dissemination and exploitation plan is let's say is the standard approach. So the project have to provide and have to plan for such a plan, and also mention it clearly in the proposal. Okay, so when it comes to the COFUND budget, this is evaluated under excellence a bit, again, not the standard approach like for other programs where it falls under implementation. Here it's under excellence 1.2, where the experts are looking at the quality and the attractiveness of the appointment conditions. And here basically these are the new rates that have been adapted. So for doctoral now we have 3,500 euro, and for postdoctoral 4,980 euro. And these are the fixed rates that I mentioned that the REA is contributing. And these become eligible. These can be claimed once the program demonstrates that the fellowship months were eligible. And the fellows taking on these fellowship months were also compliant with all these eligibility conditions. So the budget is basically can be used to any of the research, any of the cost items. So we pay in the table later on the slide. I will show you the different type of cost items, and it can cover any of those items. And an important minimum compliance criteria is that the monthly gross remuneration and the mobility cost should be at least 3,500 and 4,980 euros. And this is something that you have to present in the Part B budget table that I will show you shortly. So before going to the Part B, the first...
Sorry, Mikita.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jozsef. Would you mind closing the message that comes from Teams where it says Team Microsoft is sharing your screen? Maybe hide that message. I think it blocks. Yeah, perfect. It's because it blocks some of the information, so some of the
Okay.
people in the
Okay,
audience
okay.
couldn't see the message. Thank you. I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you.
No worries. Okay, so part A of the budget table, I mean, this is the form that you prepare logging into the SAP submission tool. This is an online tool that the Commission is using for applicants to submit their bids. So when you go there, and when it comes to COFUND, there's an important point to remember. Implementing partners, so those partners that are actually can actually recruit in this program are actually not encoded in Part A. So you're not able to encode them. You only list the beneficiary / coordinator, and then below, this is always the participant number 1, and then below you list, depending on how many, you list the associated partners. Now, in this case, you see, you will need to put the short name, the role, the country, then the affiliation of the entity, and very importantly, you will put the number of person month if it's a fellowship or an employment contract. Of course, fellowships are exceptional, so it's by the standard approach is to award employment contracts. And then the system, based on the number of person month, will automatically calculate the EU contribution. And so this is the information that figures in the column total. Then you have 2 additional columns. One is called own resources, one is called financial contribution. So under own resources, the beneficiary coordinator must encode its own contribution to the program. And under financial contribution, in the first row, this is where the beneficiary will include the financial contribution of the implementing partners. As I said, implementing partners are not listed, so we cannot put them anywhere else. That's why the beneficiary will need to put, if any, contribution from implementing partner. It has to go to the first row under financial contribution. And then going to the following rows, where I said the beneficiary will encode the associated partners, they will list their own contribution under the column, well, financial contribution. Here it's more straightforward. And an important point again is that whatever is introduced in Part A should reflect exactly what is presented in Part B. Because this can create confusion for us in the preliminary checks, but certainly for the evaluators as well. So this is the Part B budget table that I was referring to. So here are the different cost categories. So the COFUND allowance, what we are paying, REA, is 3,500 for doctoral and 4,980 for postdoctoral. And these items need to be split up between the different cost categories. So remuneration, mobility, family, travel, research costs, other, management, indirect. However, you have to note that the remuneration and the mobility together have to reach at least these amounts as well. So there are 2 conditions here that you have to be paying attention to. And yeah, for all the rest, I mean, you delete whichever cost item is not applicable for you. But the first 2 rows, so remuneration, mobility, allowance, you see with the 2 stars, these need to be at least 3,500 and 4,980. So if somebody would decide to give a very low amount of remuneration from the 3,500 to a doctoral fellow, and all the rest would be put under management or indirect costs, this would not be compliant with the basic requirement. Okay, so moving on to the next section, the so-called red flags. These red flags were introduced based on previous years of experience in the evaluations, and also I mean, discussion and also consultation with DGAC and also a wider NCP network. So basically, one point, I mean, one of the main cornerstone of the whole program is about how the selection committees are put together. And here you really have to pay attention that in case you are applying for a doctoral program, you have to demonstrate that you have independent evaluators from inside and also outside the partnership. There is a good balance between this and no conflict of interest, and also this good balance should be demonstrated at all stages of the process. In case of postdoctoral programs, you need the independent evaluators, not only from inside and outside the partnership, but also there should be an international peer review component demonstrated in the applications. So once again, this is something that you need to clearly explain in your proposal, and then once any of the proposal is successful, afterwards when you report to us before we release the payment, the ex-ante checks, one of the things we do is really we want to make sure that this is the case, and if it's not the case, then again we can reject cost. So this is important eligibility criterion for the payment. So the same approach for the second point, which is the role of the supervisors in these kind of programs, and basically this role should really be limited only for the supervisors to provide information about what is available in terms of research options, what kind of infrastructure is available for the fellows, and the supervisors cannot be involved in the preparation of proposals, and they also cannot be part of the selection panels in any way possible, in order to avoid any sort of pre-selection and bias in the recruitment and selection process. The third point, which I already referred to, is the underpayment of fellows. So once again, if you go back to this budget table, so the remuneration part and the mobility cost, the two together has to be at least 3,500 and 4,980 for the different type of fellowships. And yeah, and 50% of that in case you are applying for fixed amount fellowships. And finally, the last point that we have also included in the guide for applicants this year is about the using generative AI tools for the programs to select these co-funded proposals. So this is something that should be really avoided, and also made it clear. I mean, already by having to put together these panel selection and recruitment panels, but also besides that, the effective evaluation. I mean, the ranking and the grading of these applications should be done by human intervention, by these expert panels. Okay, just a quick point on the deadline and then the budget, which is, I think Raquel already mentioned. So the call opened on the 16th of December. It will be closed on the 8th of April, and the budget is 105 million euros. So a bit more than last time. And yeah, the UK's participation so far in Horizon Europe in COFUND, the 25 call, there were under doctoral panel, some applications, 8, and 2 of them were invited for the gap, and including Titanes, and I think they are in the process of signing. We are in the process of signing these grants. So, and the 24 call, we only had 2 applications, but they were not ranked sufficiently high to be invited to prepare the grant agreement. So that's from my side. Do we want to open for questions now, or?
Thank you very much, Jozsef, for your presentation. Now we have Dr. Jesper Christensen, who is going to present his slide. Jesper, if I give you, could you gain control, or would it be better if you present your slides from your side?
You can try if you want
Okay.
to.
Let me try, and then you tell me if you can gain control of them.
Yeah. No, it's still grayed out, so I'll just share.
It's still
mine.
grey out. Yeah. Okay, I will stop sharing, and then you can. Let me see if I can give you control. Let me try. It says give control. I can't give you control, so I think I will let you to.
Okay.
One of those things. Thank you.
Okay. So it should be this one. Yeah. Okay. So, sorry. Let me just get. Yeah. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And second of all, just to everyone here, apologies for the slides. They're not particularly visually attractive. I appreciate that, but I just tried to get some information down. I think it's important to know that what I'm going to share is just my experience and kind of the things that I've picked up in writing and securing a co-fund. It doesn't mean it's the only way of doing it. It doesn't mean that what I say is going to work for you. So as I said, this is just my thoughts on this. It's probably relevant to know that my experience is based on doctoral proposals, so it's not postdocs. I've not been involved with that side of things. So yeah, I think it's just useful to know that. The first thing that I wouldn't say struggled with, but was a bit of a change. If you're used to writing, proposals for the EPSRC or Horizon or whatever, you know that the way you write things is, in terms of the impact, in terms of this is what we're going to do, it's very technical. It's very much focused on the outcomes from a technical perspective, for lack of a better term. You have to change that here, because the outcome of this is really the people that come through your co-fund, come through your process. So it's the style of writing, in my experience, is different. And it takes just a little bit of getting used to, because the first thing I did was sat down and write, so these are the objectives, this is the aim. And then I read it back to myself and thought, well, actually, it doesn't really click with what co-fund is. So just be aware of that. I'm going to repeat myself a few times throughout my slides about that, but just get into a slightly different way of thinking. And kind of in a similar way here, what you need to demonstrate is a proposal which is obviously unique, it's attractive. You've just seen Jozsef's slides on, the excellence, the research, and that kind of things, which is good. But again, unlike Horizon, for example, you don't have all the ingredients ready to go at this stage in time. Remember, you're recruiting people. Those people will have some ideas, some novelty, and you should allow for those people to bring that novelty to the table throughout your program. So what I mean by that is you need to have a program which has a clear identity, a clear purpose, otherwise you're not going to meet these excellence scores. But at the same time, you need to demonstrate let's call it an ecosystem, which is inviting, which allows these people to grow within the confinements of what you offer. So what I'm trying to say is you shouldn't have a fixed, this is everything that we're going to do. We're going to do exactly this, and PhD or doctoral fellow A is going to do exactly this, and B is going to do exactly this. But so there's a very delicate balance, in my opinion, between having that something which isn't unclear. So, we're going to, I don't know, improve the environment in the UK. That's very unclear. but at the same time, so we have something a little bit more specific than that, but not too restrictive, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but it's a bit sort of loose boundaries, but try and strike the right balance between those two things. And also, I think you can admit at this stage that maybe you don't have all the partners that you need at this stage, because if a doctoral fellow comes in and say, well, I want to work on this, and it fits within the identity of your proposal, but I need another partner, you should kind of have a mechanism, again, in my opinion, for being able to add that partner later on. So those, I think it's a very delicate balance, between having something with a clear identity, which is supportive, of which is versus something which is very kind of finite and, for lack of a better term in this context, restrictive. So I kind of skipped a little bit ahead of myself there. So my next point is really the kind of the same thing here. So you don't know who your fellows are going to be. As you've just seen, if you know that, then it's obviously an issue with your proposal. And equally, you don't know the skill set. So later on, we'll talk about the recruitment and evaluation process. And the number one criteria throughout that, again, should be excellence of the research of what comes out of your program. You should allow people to develop. So you need this kind of flexibility into it. So again, as I said, and I'm just repeating myself here, individual PhD or fellow projects, don't define them to a minute detail, but equally don't not define them at all. There should be an idea about what these generally would be about, or how they belong together. And I'll have a bit more on that on my next slides. So let me just get back to this. So yeah. Okay. So let's take a step back. So obviously the first thing you need to think about, what is it you're trying to achieve? How is it going to change things, just like you would with any horizon code or anything like that? But again, think slightly different here, because you are taking on a number of people, you're giving them a unique skill set, which will ultimately lead to some changes, hopefully, in your selected area. So you need to take people through your program. These people, these fellows, should have a new skill set that no one else has. That skill set should be highly desirable through academia, through industry, through whatever is relevant. It shouldn't just be like, a minute thing that's only applicable to people in this particular company, for example. So what is it that's going to make them stand out? Are they realistically going to be able to find good employment afterwards once they finish your program? Remember, again, to think beyond. Think about this nurturing, supportive environment. So again, a little bit of repetition here. This is people skills. It's not the hard technical thing that goes with it. They should have some technical background, of course. So that right balance is really important. How many fellows are you going to put through your program? That's obviously the first thing you think about, and it can be quite easy. Oh, I want 25 because that's a good number. But why is it 25? Is it 22? Or is it 15? Why? You kind of need to justify that again in terms of how many people do you actually need to make this difference? How do these people, are they going to work together somehow? How is it going to kind of fit together? So try and think a little bit more than just pick a number out of the air. Try and be a bit selective and be a bit critical about the number that you actually choose. As Joseph just showed again, you might have a consortium where you have more than just the one partner. Typically, I think you'd have some academic partners and some non-academic partners working together. Again, what's the identity of each partner? I don't think it's just a question of gathering 500 names and putting them in and we got this wonderful thing together, because I don't think that shows that it's a that is kind of like a supportive environment, because maybe that will just confuse your potential fellows, that there's so many things to choose from. How do I kind of find identity in this? So again, trying to strike the right balance there, and maybe choose a fewer number to start with, but more strategic ones that maybe have further networks that you can exploit as and when the fellows come on board. So a bit more about that. Who's going to contribute to the training? How are they going to contribute? Again, try and be a bit sharp here, a bit clinical here about what does this partner actually bring that's unique, that, you know, partner A brings that partner B doesn't bring, or is partner A, B, and C effectively the same? So how are we going to explore that or exploit that? How's this going to work? So try and avoid too much duplication, I would say, and find this complementary kind of setup. As I said earlier, I would suggest, but again, this is just my opinion, that it might be a good idea to have some sort of maybe specific points in your program when it actually runs for, okay, at this time we're going to review and add some new partners. If there's been some requests for the fellows, for example, to do that, to suit their needs. Implementing partners are quite different, I think, to think about vis-a-vis what Jozsef just said, because there's some exchange of funding here. And it's not necessarily something you need to completely bottom out and have every detail in place before you submit your proposal, but you need to make sure that there is a pathway for this to work. Because I don't know if there's any solicitors around, but when things go to the solicitors, I find, you know, and we start speaking about money and exchange of things, then things tend to take a different tone and take a long time, and sometimes it just really does not work well. So really try and bottom that out. If you have other implementing partners from the start, have some initial conversations to make sure you can find a common ground for this to work. And equally, if you have implementing partners, maybe across different countries, what about, you know, entry requirements for PhD students, the benefits, etc.? How does all this match up across borders, across different institutions? Again, don't necessarily have to have everything hashed out to the nth degree, but you need to make sure there's a common ground for that, because if you can't find that common ground and that thing that fits for everyone, I think you're going to have a big problem later on. Okay, so let's start out now by actually trying to think of what might go into a proposal. I think it's very important to demonstrate that your program is not just a bunch of PhDs put together that, you know, you could have in your university, or, excuse me, wherever you work, you might have a cohort of 10, 15 PhD students anyway, and they're just doing different things, and, you know, here's 16 PhD students. What does this bring together? How are you going to link your PhDs or your fellows together? There should be an added benefit, a significant added benefit of something, a program this size. So in fact, what I'm asking is, how does 1 and 1 make 3? You need to find what's that extra bit that your program offers. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with PhD students, and one thing you definitely don't want to do is make PhD students directly dependent on each other, because if one fails, does everyone fail then? That's a big problem. So you have to be careful about linking PhDs or making them dependent on each other, but I think quite clearly you should have some sort of linkage between them to achieve your impact, to achieve or to enrich the skill sets, etc., that your fellows are going to get. So quite carefully think about how are you going to explain that, because I think that needs to be very clear in your program. If you just say, well, here's a list of 15 PhD students, there's no link in between them apart from the fact they work in the same area, I think you're missing a big trick there. So things that this can be done is, of course, you can have some events that bring people together. I think you should try and go significantly beyond that. I think you should try and link them together. Again, I use the term technical here. So I've just given you example of how I try to explain things in my proposal. So I had 4 main research pillars, what I call RP1, 2, 4. And those are quite significantly different in the nature. And then I've said, okay, so I've got these 4 pillars. And as you can see in my diagram on the bottom right, each of these pillars has 4 fellows in them, DF, doctoral fellows. And that's how they're linked together. So these 4 fellows work primarily in these research pillars, but I've given them a context. So it could be something like a scenario that they work on, for example, or a specific group of partners that they work with, a specific application, I don't know, that links them together across the different pillars. So that's kind of where my rows come in. So DF 1, 2, 3, and 4, for example, work in this particular context or this particular setup, whatever it is. So that's where the transdisciplinarity comes into my proposal. But they also have the added benefits of working intradisciplinary throughout the research pillars. Again, I'm not saying this is the way to do it. I'm saying this is the way that I did it, and I received quite complimentary feedback on that. And then I tried to integrate some things that, for lack of a better term, force people to actually communicate across pillars and across disciplines. Yeah. Okay, so going on to writing your proposal, I cannot stress enough how useful I found the handbook. Really just read through it and keep it next to you at all times. It doesn't mean to say you have to write things exactly in the way or in the order in which it's listed in there, but it has so many good pointers and so many things to be aware of, I think. And I think that's really, really useful. Needless to say, plan out your section count beforehand and try to, well, that's what I did, break the number of pages down relative to the weighting that you have. So you have the weighting of 50, 30, and 20. And I think you have, memory serves me right, just over 30 pages. So it kind of gives you an indication of how many pages each section should take up. I think as a general thing, we all like to use acronyms, but don't use too many acronyms. I think generally you have space to write it out a little bit more. Yeah, it's a general thing. You don't want to annoy evaluators by them not understanding what's on your page because they can't remember an acronym that you defined 5 pages back. There's some very specific subheadings again in the actual template for the proposal. Also, some of them are broken down more in the Radiance handbook. Again, needless to say, make sure you directly address what it actually says in there. And there was a slight change in some of the things that Jozsef presented there. But again, this change of how you write things from other types of proposals, the technical science is not the first thing you put up. It's not the first thing that's discussed. It's around the people, it's around the process. Yes, so going back to these 3 main pointers here, excellence, needless to say, is the #1 criteria. It's very important. If you're playing the numbers game, then I think it's quote unquote easier to score points for impact and implementation. I think it's more controllable to get the maximum points in those 2 sections. And I do think you probably do need maximum points in those 2 sections to, or very close to it, to have a good chance of actually securing a proposal. Things like the recruitment evaluation process, you can write it out. You can be very specific, really try and think things through. Think back to the slides that Jozsef had earlier about these red flags, about that process. And then you, I feel it's relatively straightforward to sit down and write a very strong setup for that. It needs to be robust. It does not need to be complicated. I think there's a significant difference between those two things. You obviously also need to make sure you can actually deliver this afterwards. As I said earlier, if you have multiple implementing partners, go back and see, will this process work for them and for us? You don't want to, maybe you do want to, but I strongly recommend against it. It's if you have 2 or 3 implementing partners, you cannot have doctoral fellows. Oh, if you want to apply here, it's process A or it's process B or process C. You should have one outward facing, easily understandable recruitment and evaluation process, and you need to explain that well and clearly in your proposal. So I recommend you use a variation of schematics, diagrams that show the flow of the process, and then below that you add specific details about each step of that process, how it links to the rest of the process, who are the people involved in that process, how are you going to recruit the people involved in that process? Because, as earlier mentioned, there are people inside your organization, inside the consortium, inside your other implementing partners that are part of that process, but there are also people outside of that process. How are you going to recruit them? How are you going to make sure they have the right skill set for evaluating this? How are you going to ensure this, to avoid this conflict of interest, but at the same time ensure that they're technically relevant or correct, I can't find the right term here, to assess this expert proposal, which is what a doctoral fellow application should be. How are you going to manage all that? How many people do you need in that process? Well, that depends on how many fellows you're going to have and how many different steps of your process you're going to have. Think of backups. People are not available at the last minute, people get ill, whatever. Does that mean that an entire day of everyone coming together for interviews, for example, is botched? Have some backups, have some, you know, some fallback things in here that clearly does not delay the overall process of your recruitment campaign, because you are under a relatively limited time there. You have 60 months in total. It takes time to recruit people. It takes time to get people into place. Things like redress as well. You need to have a clear independent method for doing that. And again, how does that affect your overall process? If there's 2 people, for example, or 2 applicants that complain at some stage, how's that going to be built in? So I think you need to think of all these things, but I think it's easier to make a robust case for this. Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't pay much attention to the excellence, but I think these are sections that you really, really make sure you get absolutely right. Excellence is a little bit more open to interpretation, and obviously different disciplines, etc., will have different things, but the implementation in particular, this process, the impact, etc., is a bit more universal. So that's a bit more you have in common with every other proposal, regardless of the discipline. And at the end of the day, of course, when you are successful, remember you have to actually do this. So there's no point in throwing all sorts of wonderful, elaborate things at it, and then when it comes to it, we can't actually deliver it because we haven't got the resources, or we haven't got the people, or this, that, and the other. So needless to say, be realistic. And also, you know, if it just takes up too much manpower to go through this, then I think you should also take a step back and say, well, is this the right application for me? Because maybe it's not. Okay, so other things, widening participation, gender widening, I think is a must, but I think it's also to a large extent pretty standard now. So what can you do that makes your proposal stand out? Okay, you might think you have something unique in terms of your scientific breakthrough, which is great, but there are other areas in which you can stand out. So things like widening participation, I think, is an area where you can definitely stand out. Is there a specific group that's underrepresented that you could, for example, target as part of your recruitment process? But even better, can you use that unique skill set that those people bring into your CoFund program to improve the skill sets of the people within it? So if we go back to here, when I talked about, you can't see my mouse, sorry, on the bottom right there, where people, different fellows across different disciplines, etc., work together. Maybe these 4 research pillars have traditionally have different types of people applying to it and different types of underrepresented people. Can you somehow use this to demonstrate or use that as part of your recruitment process, and then use that in the implementing phase of your proposal to then show that apart from the technical skills that these people get, they also get some softer skills, which will help them, which will help our institutions, our employers in the future to create more widening participation in recruitment, in office workspace, in whatever it is in there. Try and think about that. Again, a suggestion. But things, what makes you stand out? Other things that can make you stand out is about the recruitment campaign. Are you just going to, well, here's a newsletter here, and here's an advert there? Is that what you're going to use? Is that going to reach the target audience that you want? I've not gotten to this stage yet myself, but the experience I've heard from others is, although CoFund and generally the funding that comes with it for doctoral fellows is quite appealing, it's still quite difficult to actually recruit the fellows. So I think you need to carefully think again about what can make you stand out here, because one thing is being awarded. If you then can't recruit the fellows, then you have a problem, don't you? Because your program isn't really going anywhere. And evaluators, I think, are going to see that as a weakness. Because if you can't recruit the people, then kind of what good is this? Try and think about things like that. What can make stand out? What can we do that makes us more innovative in the context? I think that's quite useful to have. It's also maybe an opportunity for you to try something a bit outside of the norm of what you do currently in your recruitment campaigns. Again, you have a clear message about what it is that your program does. Make sure that it's clear, make sure you have clear branding, make sure that comes across in your proposal. So it has a very clear identity, it has a very clear message, and you can kind of use that throughout the entire proposal that you submit, but also in terms of the actual implementation afterwards. Think of the length of contract you offer each of your fellows. Is it 36 months? Is it 48 months? I think you can make an argument for anything you want inside of there. You obviously want to make sure they have bolstered training, secondments, etc., that help them to become these more this kind of new type of employee of the future, let's call it that. But just be careful as well. It's quite easy to just throw loads of training on there. You still have to think about, they still have a PhD to complete in the midst of this. So have the right balance of mandatory training and some optional training. So again, mandatory training is something that should go across your entire cohort. So this should help to make this 1 and 1 equals 3. You should then have some optional training where individuals can kind of tailor it to their specific pillars, to their specific context, to their specific personal ambitions. How are you kind of going to manage that? Are you, for example, are you going to put a cap on the maximum amount of training they can do to make sure they complete the piece? Maybe you don't, maybe you do. But think about that. Don't kind of over-egg this and just throw loads and loads of training at them, because I don't think that'll be evaluated well, because there's not enough time to actually do a PhD in there. How do you set them up? The program's going to end one day, and as wonderful as the program is, it's going to end at some point. How are you going to help them post your program? Are you just going to say, well, okay, you've got the contract for this day, that's it, you're out the door, thank you very much? Hopefully not. Hopefully you're going to use the partners that you have inside of your program to help the fellows inside it create a network, which in future or towards the end of their COFUND employment will help them to secure relevant positions, whether that's in academia, industry, whatever. Maybe it's directly with one of the implementer partners, but equally there shouldn't be like a requirement somewhere in there that you have to work with this partner afterwards or anything like that. It's about creating opportunities, but create those opportunities post COFUND as well. I think that's all I have on my slides.
Thank you very much for a very useful presentation. It was great to hear your perspective of the scheme. I think it's always very valuable to hear what a current applicant or awardee had to or went through, and what found challenging and what found useful of the scheme. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And thank you very much to Jozsef as well for presenting his slides. There are a few questions in the chat. I started answering them, but I think it will be useful for the remaining of the audience to raise those. We can go through those as we see who might be best to answer those. I will start with the first question, if that's okay. I think some of them are not relevant to the scheme, so I will answer them individually. But the first question is, where partners host, I imagine it refers to associated partners, so where associated partners host fellows for secondments but do not receive funding for this from the program, is it necessary or beneficial to list them as associated partner? Maybe Jozsef or
Hello, do you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Yes,
Can you
yes.
hear me?
Yes. Well, actually, I only heard the second part of the. Can you repeat the first part of the sentence, please?
Of course, I will repeat the question again. So where the partners host fellows, it refers to associated partners for secondments, but they do not receive funding directly from the European Commission, is it necessary to list them as associated partners?
Yes.
And they need to be listed on Part 8, even though that they don't receive funding directly from the European Commission.
No, no, of course, yeah. You list them as associated partner, and then I mean, depending whether they provide some own funding for the secondments or training, I don't know what, depending on their role, but they should be listed in Part A and also in Part B, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jozsef. There is another question maybe for you, Jozsef, actually, is Nina, you want to go through this one? You're on mute.
Yes, sorry. Yes, there is a question, I think, for Jozsef around remuneration. Is the gross monthly remuneration defined as inclusive or exclusive of employers' costs related to, let's say, social security, for instance?
So the gross, how the work program defines this gross remuneration, including the cost for the employer and the employee, so everything, the full cost package.
Right. So the employee in the end will receive less than that figure you showed on
Indeed.
the slide.
So if we start from the gross remuneration, again, I'm following the terminology of the work program, you subtract the employer's cost, then it's the gross salary, and then afterwards, depending on what the employee needs to pay, then we get to the net salary. But at the application stage, I mean, we all this budgeting and planning is, and also our contribution is supposed to cover the full cost.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
when it comes to implementation, when you have to publicize the post, I mean, when the grantee, then at that stage they have to publicize the gross salary. So the fellows, the future
Yes.
fellows, in the course of the program, they should have an indication about how much the gross salary is.
That's clear. And I suppose linked to remuneration, Raquel, if I may, there's a question on the country coefficient adjustment. The figure you showed in your slide, 4,980 research per month, is that for the postdoc? Is that adjusted to Belgium, isn't it? And then
well, I mean, it's a rate which is, there is no country coefficient applied in COFUND. So,
okay.
I mean, the original amount, I suppose it's a sort of average amount. Frankly, I'm not entirely sure how the calculation was done to come up with this figure, but it's certainly applied all across Europe. So, independently from the country, this is the amount we pay. There is no adjustment, either increase or decrease. So.
Okay, so yeah.
And
okay,
if I might add to that, the country correction coefficient only applies to the doctoral networks and postdoctoral fellowship living allowance. So I think it's where some of the confusion might arise in there. And I think there is a question in here, Jozsef, for one of the red flags that you highlighted on your presentation. So what are the independent evaluators and what role do they play in the evaluation of the proposals?
Well, I mean, we actually, I mean, bring this in one of those best practices actually that the Commission has been putting in practice in the last many decades. So we also use this independent peer review process to evaluate the proposals submitted to us. I mean, Marie Curie and all other type of grants. I mean, they should be independent. They should sign a form conflict of interest that they don't have any conflict with the applicant. I mean, we follow Commission as a set of rules. It's also possible that the COFUND applicants use this definition of conflict of interest and applies it in their own program. So, but the bottom line is, before engaging evaluators, external people, they have to declare that they don't have any conflict of interest, and their role is to assess the submitted projects against a set of criteria. Well, the conditions that I mentioned, I mean, when it comes to a doctoral program, what we expect that the consortium, which is okay, it's a bit of a fake notion here, but I mean, the beneficiary and the different type of partners, that's what we call a consortium. The evaluators have to, you can have some of them coming from these partners, but also outside, there should be a sort of balance. For postdoctoral, we expect that there is a peer review, international peer review component demonstrated. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
I think you answered the question. Thank you very much, Jozsef. You want me to go next, Nina, or you want to ask the next question?
I think there's a question here for both of you, really. It's about the typical level of involvement in a COFUND application in terms of number of staff involved for each organization, the ratio between academic and industry partner. So I think Jozsef can give a more global perspective, and maybe Jesper can maybe tell us a bit more about the specifics of his project in particular.
I'm sorry. I lost the first part of the question. I don't know, something might be wrong with my computer.
No
Can
problem.
you repeat?
Yes.
I mean,
some guidance on the typical sort of setup for a COFUND. How many staff should be involved at each organization? The ratio between academic and industry partners, and the duration of Yeah,
I mean, it's okay. So overall duration, I mean, as I said, it's typically it should be planned for 60 months, the whole thing. I mean, Well, a lot of depends on how much own resources are available, because I mean that should, and the capacity of the organization to run these selections, how many rounds of selections you are able to do, also the topic that you are looking to launch a program in. I mean, we have like fully bottom-up programs where they can apply in any field of science, but then you have also more targeted programs. So there's really no golden rules in this sense. I mean, it has to make sense. It has to be feasible, manageable. It has to be credible, especially at the stage of the application, because I mean, the experts are reading, they rely on what they read, and they try to judge what they read. So yeah, I mean, industrial participation, if the topic is, again, if it makes sense for the topic or the focus of the program, certainly it can be an added value also for to have the fellows take part in trainings in these sectors and to do secondments. This is something very much welcome. But yeah, it's difficult to give a global answer on this. Also, I mean, typically doctoral programs are much more prescriptive. I mean, the postdoctoral, there are much more freedom, obviously, because of the maturity of the candidates to define their own research projects. So it really depends on a lot of things. I mean, the bottom line is that, I mean, even if it's a smaller program, it's not it's based on the experience that I have seen, is if it's well defined and well presented, I mean, they're not in disadvantage compared to very overly ambitious program, which may want to engage many more fellows and all kind of partners, you know. I mean, also coming to a program with, I don't know, 75 associated partners, it's not always something that makes the application very, I mean, very credible. When they want to recruit less fellows than the number of associated partners, is a bit, you know, it should be kind of driven by common sense and feasibility more than anything else.
That's great. Thank you. Okay.
I think one of the questions that we get asked quite a lot is a question about the COFUND mechanism. What's right? What percentage is right and what percentage is not right? Or what institutions should be aiming for? Perhaps Jozsef, you can give your view, and also Jesper, what sort of contribution you had in your proposal. Was it 40-60? You had a lot of in kind, or was it cash? I think that's a question that we get asked quite a lot, and it's also in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, okay, again, here it's difficult to give a very precise answer, because since we pay a fixed amount, I mean, it depends on the host country or the host organization, how much they have at disposal. And of course, certain countries, I mean, also due to the national schemes or the availability of these resources, they can offer much lower own resources than other countries. So I mean, I would say, yeah, typically this kind of around 50, 40, 60, this sort of thing could be an indication, but it really is, it's an indication. I mean, again, a country, I don't know, country like Sweden or Finland will have a different own resources based on their own standards than a country from Eastern Europe, you know, Bulgaria, Romania. So, and this is factored in for the evaluation as well. I mean, the experts are not judging, just comparing these own resources. I mean, they are looking at the context as well, and how much this would bring forward the whole, also in terms of regional and local development. So there is not a fixed rate that is like there's no golden rule in this sense.
Thank you very much, Jozsef. And your experience, Jesper, was that a 40-60? Was it 50-50? Was there a lot of in kind, or was there cash?
There's a little bit. I think so. Overall, if I do the actual numbers, I would say that it's probably more, I say 35% from the commission, the rest of it from in-kind contributions. If I break that down into cash, I'd probably say actual cash contributions, it's probably in the region of 20%. I'd say something like that. And then you have all the in-kind ones, which is obviously staffing time and other things, you know, but I'd say something around that. So again, I'd say 60-40 probably isn't bad. But as Joseph said, I think it's a very difficult question to answer because it just depends.
There isn't a golden rule where it says 40-60 is the right split or anything like that. So it really depends on the projects and also the region or the country that it's in. So all those things are taken into account.
It depends on what you're offering, doesn't it? At the end of the day, it's not evaluating purely the finances, it's evaluating what's being offered in terms of the benefits of the program.
Thank you both.
Perhaps we can take a question on international PhD fees, which in the UK are quite significant. And the question is whether those costs can be considered as part of the financial match funding contribution in the COFUND. It's probably for Joseph, I would imagine.
So these are the tuition fees, or?
Yeah.
Well, this should be indeed covered by the. I mean, it should be factored in and budgeted into the global program budget. So once the fellow is recruited, they cannot be charged under the fellows this sort of cost.
Okay, thank you. There was a more general question about I think the difference between secondment and duration of the fellowship. I think that can be easily addressed. What's the difference between the duration of a secondment and the duration of a fellowship? And there was no clarity for about the 50% restriction. What would that mean in practice in this case?
Well, it used to be 1/3, and now it's 50%. So I mean, if there is a 1-year fellowship, the fellow can go up to 6 months on secondment.
And the secondment is a segment of that overall duration of the fellowship.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what the question.
Indeed.
Maybe I can add something to that as well. So the fellowship length is obviously the length of the contract for the individual fellow. But as part of that, there is the initial mobility requirement where they have to move to the new country, whatever. Mm-hmm. So they're based at the implementing partner at that stage, but they also have to do secondments with other partners to move away from their home base for a period of time.
Thank you.
I think a lot of these things, a lot of the things about the questions around the eligible costs as well. If you really just read the description that goes with the code, just actually explains things quite well, and it is actually relatively simple compared to a lot of other things like Horizon, for example, because there's a lot less things that's just directly eligible.
There is a question about supervisors, and I think probably maybe Joseph can address that one. So it says the postdoc have to work closely in the supervisor lab. Can they be involved in the interview panel or after external evaluation of written application? So can the supervisors be involved in the interview process and selection process of their fellows or the postdocs in this case?
No, this was one of the red flags that was defined. So they should not be involved in the proposal preparation and neither in the selection of the candidates. So this is applied not only for postdocs, also for the doctoral program as well.
Thank you very much, Joseph. somebody put a couple of or 3 questions in the chat rather than the Q&A, and they're mainly for you, Jesper, if that's okay. First of all, want to congratulate you on Titanis, and a few questions. Was Titanis awarded in the first round, or do you have to resubmit your proposal?
No, this was the first draft of it.
Fantastic. And do you give details about the placements for the fellows
So
on your proposal?
I specified some guidelines. I didn't specify that candidate or doctoral fellow A goes here, doctoral fellow B goes there. As I said earlier, I think it's around demonstrating here are all the ingredients. Now it's up to the doctoral fellows to a large extent to then put those ingredients together. So it's a tailored fellow for them, or a tailored PhD for them specifically, but we set some outline things around, as I showed in my table there, that, you know, there's some context here and there's some things here. And then I let it so that part of the evaluation criteria for when applicants apply to the program, the main criteria is the excellence, so they have to write their own research plan. So I'm saying it needs to be something in this area around this. Here are some of the partners that we currently have. They're required to write a brief strategy of how they want to use those partners, or explain why they would need another partner. They would need a partner, a specific other type of partner that could make that justification, and then we would have a later stage where we then put all those together and go out and try and recruit those partners to add to it. So there are some guidelines around it needs to be this duration. We recommend that it's, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we recommend that it's longer periods of times and then fewer of them. And the main reason for that is A, to save on costs for travel, but also in terms of sustainability. So it means less travel, you know, less environmental footprint.
Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. And one last question, if I may, can you share a bit more about the recruiting and selection strategy that you follow? So what was the scoring threshold, ranking, etc., that you sort of follow on your proposal?
I'm not entirely, can you just repeat that for me?
Of course, yeah. Whether you can share a bit more information about the recruiting and selection strategy that you had in place in your proposal.
Okay. Yeah.
So the scoring threshold, the ranking of the applicants, etc.
So I had, off the top of my head, I think I have 5 different steps for the recruitment of the fellows. I tried to make it less labor intensive at the start, where we may have more applicants. So specifically, as Joseph said, did not use AI for any part of this, but we tried to set up a, let's call it a light application process at start, where slightly less documentation is required and more sort of emphasis is put on that we assume what the applicants are saying is correct. So, for example, I didn't ask them to submit a full ethics application from the onset, but I asked them to answer some basic questions which may or may not give rise to any issues relating to ethics. So that means that I can kind of automate that process. So I can just kind of see whether the answer is yes or no. So it doesn't necessarily mean that someone has to sift through all those applications. We just look at the flags that come up from that. And then later on, of course, when people then get selected further down the line, we do require a full ethics application, and that might mean that things pop up there. So there is an element of trust in that early stage of it, but I think that's quite useful for 2 main things. First main thing is it doesn't add significant, or doesn't require significant amounts of effort from in terms of man hours. B, I think this is even more beneficial. It also, in my opinion, would maybe encourage more people to actually apply. because it's not a lengthy, massive process from the start. I'm not hiding the fact that there's going to be some rigorous things further down the line, but maybe a few more people might just go through that process because it's a little bit lighter at first. In each step that I have an equal balance of, let's call it, people inside the consortium and people external to the consortium. I made it very clear how I'm going to recruit these people external to the consortium and what sort of skill sets they have and how I'm going to evaluate the suitability of those people. I've also made it clear that we ask people who do the review, whether they're experienced or not experienced, so we can match them up, more experienced and less experienced people. So again, this brings a benefit to society as a whole because I'm giving someone else the chance to review something. So it's a balance. I've created a system which is which works on IDs rather than names. And the reason for that is to try and prevent any bias. I've implemented some things where I also allow people to have different alternative ways of applying. So instead of having a written CV, for example, or a cover letter, we allow people to do a short video that tells them around, that talks about their skill sets and how it works with the program, how it complements things. So I'm trying to do a lot of different things here, and a lot of those things, my main emphasis was to try and widen participation. So again, some people might not want to write CVs, some people love writing CVs. There's no difference in the way that those two things are applied. So we give our evaluators training on how to evaluate those things. Again, trying to keep the time they have to spend on it to a minimum. I should also say that for practical reasons, we are not going to remunerate our evaluators directly. What we do instead is I set a pot of money aside, and then we have 10 charities, which are related to the activities of the proposal. And then the evaluators can choose which charity they'd like to donate to. So at the end of the process, I have a pot of money. I know how many evaluators I've used, so I take that pot of money divided by the number of evaluators, and then we give one donation to these charities based on the selection of that. Because that prevents me and my university from having to set up 60 people or 100 people and pay them £50 individually, whereas I have 10 things, I just pay them directly. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It sounds like a very thorough, very thoughtful process and very inclusive, I think. So thank you for sharing your experience. Nina, you want to go next with a
maybe a question for Jozsef around Choose Europe. The question is whether this will apply only for the postdoctoral program. It's something that you have already explained, but it would be probably good to go over again, or both called the postdoctoral and the doctoral programs would be open, where the COFUND and the Choose Europe be open in parallel going forward.
Well, going forward, I mean, what we can say for the timing is 2027. So there will be a parallel. There will be parallel open call, but there were two different calls, but they will be open in parallel. So one will be the COFUND, as we discussed today. This will be only for doctoral programs, and then the Choose Europe will be postdoctoral. But the Choose Europe is slightly different construction. I mean, it's not exactly, the co-funding is sequential, so it's not exactly the same. I really invite those of you who are interested to read the work program and the differences and the peculiarities of this one, because it's not just, the difference is not just the focus of the fellowship. So
okay, thank you, that's clear.
There is I'm happy to go next. There is a question about mobility and whether you can circumvent the mobility rule. There seemed to be a slight conflict between the necessity for mobility and the necessity for inclusivity. Many underrepresented groups are unable to move from one country to another due to constraints such as family constraints, medical constraints, or simply the challenge of moving in a completely different circle. Are there any exceptions that can be made in terms of their mobility for widening participation? Can we circumvent the rule of mobility, which Jozsef, you might sort of, the answer is no, you can't really circumvent the rule of mobility is 12 months. You can have resided in the country of the host institution within the 36 months. But I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I mean, I would really, even now for the new work program, I mean, we removed this kind of, there was some flexibility for programs which were already using a mobility rule and they were already successfully implementing programs. So now this was cancelled. So now everybody, any applicant has to really follow and comply with the standard rule, as you said. So there is no real way to circumvent this. And again, I mean, the thing is that this is something that is really checked during the project, eventually ex post, if the program is selected and implemented, and then if there are ex post checks by the Commission's audit service, and then you really have to demonstrate. And if it's not the case, then you have to, some of the contribution will be recovered. So yeah. And I mean, at the application stage, it's, since we don't know the fellows, I mean, I don't even know how one can already thinking about circumventing it, because you don't even know who will apply. So how do you know you will have applicants that need to circumvent it? I mean, unless you target a special subpopulation, yeah. But in principle, no. I would say no, there is no way to really circumvent this rule.
I can add something to that. So instead of trying to circumvent it, try and embrace it instead. So in my proposal, we specifically targeted some groups that might have issues with mobility, in particular, new settings, etc. So what I did was I included an external charity that's going to provide some training for everyone involved. This is around neurodiversity in particular. So they're going to provide some training for supervisors, for staff, the wider staff that might be involved with our fellows, and also for the fellows themselves. We offer some things up front in terms of support for applicants that reach the interview stage but are not necessarily successful at the interview stage. So this is kind of to try and combat some, or not combat's not the right term, but trying to alleviate some anxiety, for example, that people might have at that stage. So in actual fact, instead of trying to avoid it, I actually try to embrace it and put some things in place. So as a university, we also already have some things in place. And I think a lot of universities already have things in place that support people with disabilities of varying kinds. So we offered that, but we also offered some more. Some training, some specific one-on-one conversations, for example. And also don't forget, if it's down to a physical thing, or not just a physical thing, actually, I think there is additional funding that you can apply for, or the individual fellow can apply for in the program afterwards. So when a specific fellow is appointed, I believe there's something they can apply for. Can't remember what it's called, but there's an additional thing that individuals can apply. So again, we set up a mechanism inside of our program to help with the application of that, not to submit it, but to help and support with the application of that. So try and turn it into a positive. I know that's easier said than done, but that's what I tried to do.
Thank you very much for giving a positive spin to that. So thank you for your contribution. There is a question on whether associated countries like the UK can lead proposal, and the answer is yes. And as an example, we have Jesper in the session. So yes, they can lead proposal. We can be either beneficiary or we can be implementing partners. We can be associated partners. We have a full participation in the program. So the answer to that is yes. I don't know if there are any other questions, Nino, that you can see on the chat.
A question whether we answered this about in-kind contribution by staff. I'm going to read it out just in case. I have a follow-up question regarding the co-financing contribution by the host institution. Jesper mentioned that in-kind contribution by staff can be included in the budget. But my understanding is that the supervisor's time for supervision cannot be included in the budget as an in-kind contribution. Can you please discuss in more detail how this in-kind contribution work in COFUND? It's pretty technical. Joseph, does it make sense, or do you want me to read it again?
I think I kind of understand. So I think that the key thing here is that there is the monthly remuneration per doctoral fellow, as Jozsef outlined. That's the thing that you need to that's a target that you need to meet. Then in addition to that, there are other things that you may or may not offer your fellows. So there could be things, for example, as attending conferences, travel. There's obviously things around the allowance that has to be there as well. But equally, you as a university and all your implementing partners will of course spend time with the doctoral fellows, and that has a value. So we added that to it. It doesn't mean that any of the grants we get per fellow from the EU goes towards that. It just means that this is an actual expense that we have, because obviously we're going to spend time with these people. So yeah.
So you included that into your budget?
I'm pretty sure we did. I didn't do the details of the of the budget. We have people to do that, but I'm quite sure that it was listed in there. But I think it's quite distinctly separated from a cash contribution. I think it's quite distinctive in the actual table.
Thank you.
There is a question about Swiss institutions in here. So similarly to the UK. So for an MSCA postdoctoral fellowship proposal, is it possible for a Swiss university in collaboration with a research centre to coordinate the project in partnership with a UK university with a mobility plan of 1 year at each institution? Will this setup qualify as a MSCA Global Postdoctoral Fellowship? And if so, can it be extended to a total duration of up to 3 years? I think this question is for the postdoctoral fellowship, which is not relevant for their presentation. So for that person, if he can email it to us at mariecurie-uk@acro.ac.uk, I can get back to you on that question. It's not pertinent for this session. Any other questions in here?
I think we covered most of them. I'm going to put the functional email address in the general chat for people to email us for more information.
Thank you very much, Nino. Well, I just want to thank Jozsef for joining us today and give us a wonderful presentation about the COFUND and sharing your insights about the scheme, and also for helping us to share to answer all the questions that were in the chat. By all means, this is not a one opportunity to ask questions. Please do email us with more questions if you have them. And Jesper, thank you ever so much for your valuable contribution to this session. I know that you're in the middle of wrapping up things, so your time has been precious. So thank you ever so much to both of you for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it. There were more people than we were expecting. I think we double or nearly triple the number of attendees that we were expecting. So thank you so much to both of you for contributing to the session, and thank you, Nina, for helping to go through the questions in the chat and monitoring the chat as well. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. The recording will be uploaded to the event page, so it will be available in the next couple of days. So thank you. Goodbye. Have a
Okay.
good day.
And you.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.